All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. So our topic today, as many of you know, I wrote last week about the Robo-Advisor movement, how I think the B2C Robo-Advisor movement is effectively dying. Their growth rates are crashing. We're seeing less and less activity in dollars coming in. You know, the technology is great. The technology is going to be here for the long run. As many of you know, I'm a technophile, not a technophobe. So I love the technology, but this whole idea of direct-to-consumer robo-advisors seems to be dying off. The idea of being a viable intermediary and being able to market and not go bankrupt trying to market to consumers to get them to come on your robo platform. And of course, that competition is further undermined by a number of companies now that are coming in and viewing robo-advisors as a distribution channel. And I had actually predicted this as a trend a year and a half ago or more, saying one of the shifts you would see in robo-advisors is that the price of the technology would converge towards zero, because companies that can distribute ETFs through them or package it onto some other value add would eventually take the price of pure robo down to nothing. But the Department of Labor threw an interesting wild card into this as well, because as a number of you I'm sure noticed, when the DoL Fiduciary rules were being discussed, robo-advisors were actually cited by Labor Secretary Perez as an example of fiduciary advice through technology. But since then, a lot of questions have cropped up around robo-advisors and how they're working and some of the potential conflicts of interest. So while Secretary Perez held up robo-advisors as a solution for fiduciary advice for small accounts, Massachusetts a month ago released basically a position paper that said they were very concerned about the conflicts of interest in robo-advisors. And now we have this new DoL fiduciary rule. So I want to talk a minute about DoL fiduciary and what DoL actually said about robo-advice in the final rule. So at a high level, just to make sure we understand what DoL fiduciary said. So the basic rule framework for DoL fiduciary is that a fiduciary cannot receive conflicted advice, or they cannot give conflicted advice and receive variable compensation, where their compensation will vary depending on what advice they give. That's a fundamental conflict of interest, and it's banned for fiduciaries. Now, if we banned all forms of getting paid to give my advice, no one would give advice, and we would squish the entire existence of advice. So the solution to this in the Department of Labor is this thing called the best interest contract exemption, which says if you sign a contract with your clients that says you'll act in your client's best interest for reasonable compensation and not have misleading sales communication, what are called the impartial conduct standards, you will be able to give advice that is potentially conflicted, because you will make more money as the advisor by getting hired to give the advice, and still have it be permissible. And that can even be advice with forms of commissions and other compensation attached to it, as long as you can demonstrate you're meeting the impartial conduct standards. Best interest advice for reasonable compensation without misleading sales and communication. Now, the DoL provided a streamlined exemption that's being called the level fee fiduciary exemption. And level fee fiduciary essentially says if the only compensation you receive from your clients are level fees that does not vary based on the type of advice that you gave or where clients ended out with their dollars, then you have a simplified form of compliance. You still have to meet the impartial conduct standards. You have to give advice in the client's best interest for reasonable compensation and not be misleading. But you don't have all the additional policies and procedures and additional disclosure requirements that apply in the full best interest contracts. The idea is be a level fee fiduciary and you get a simplified environment. Now, in terms of robo-advice, the DoL fiduciary rule actually specifically acknowledged robo-advice by name. They said, we know this thing called robo-advice exists. And here was the basic take that they said. They said, we're concerned that robo-advisors may not meet the full fiduciary standards, and then it's not clear how they would meet the full fiduciary standards. So what we're going to do is we're going to say any robo-advisor that meets the level fee fiduciary requirements is in the clear, simply because level fee fiduciary is okay. But if you don't meet those requirements, then we're very concerned about the model. And they basically said, if you want to be a robo-advisor and survive in this environment and not have a prohibited, conflicted advice, you need to be a level fee fiduciary. So now the question comes up, kind of straightforward, can robo-advisors actually be a level fee fiduciary? And here's the interesting thing. Some can, And some are going to have a serious problem with this. Now, the classic robo-advisors, it looks like they're going to be fine in this environment. So the companies like Betterment and Wealthfront, because the reality is they do operate as a level fee fiduciary. They charge a flat AUM fee. It doesn't matter whether you get the aggressive portfolio or the conservative portfolio, which funds are in there. They charge you the same thing. Now, tiered pricing is okay. So Wealthfront gives you the first chunk of dollars for free. Then they charge you at the upper tiers. Betterment charges you more at the low end and then lower at the higher end. So their fee schedule tiers down from 35 bips to 25 bips to 15 bips. That's fine. Level fee fiduciary doesn't actually say you have to have the same fee across the board, regardless of assets. What it says is for a particular client, the fees have to be level regardless of what you invest them in. So you can't, you would have a problem if, say, you charge more for the equities than for the fixed income. So now you have a conflict of interest where you can make more money by dialing clients' equity exposure up because you got paid more on the equity side than the fixed income side. So tiered pricing is okay, but the compensation has to be leveled no matter which investments you end out in within that robo platform. So here's the problem that Schwab has. When you look at the Schwab Robo-Advisor, about 3/4 of what they recommend are their own proprietary product. Schwab ETFs and the infamous cash allocation to Schwab Bank that can be as much as a quarter of the portfolio in some scenarios. And Schwab makes money on this. Like the reality, the reason that Schwab has a nominal price of 0%, it's free robo-advice, is because they make money on the products inside the robo-advisor. So they don't have to charge an intermediary fee because they're going to make money as the manufacturer of the products that go inside the robo. Here's the problem, though. Schwab doesn't make the same amount of money on these things. Some of the ETFs have higher expense ratios. Some have lower expense ratios. Schwab makes more money off the Schwab Bank than it will off some of the Schwab ETFs. Schwab makes no money off of the non-Schwab ETFs, or maybe gets a sub-TA fee or some back-end fee, but not the same fee that it gets on the products they manufacture. So Schwab has the fundamental problem that level fee fiduciary was meant to crack down on, which is you can't make different compensation as a level fee fiduciary on some investment allocations versus other investment allocations. That's not a level fee fiduciary. And in fact, the problem is even worse for robo platforms like Schwab, because not only do the new DoL rules say you can't have this uneven compensation where you make more on some than others as a level fee fiduciary, you would have to go through the whole best interest contract. But even the best interest contract doesn't save you if you have discretion. Department of Labor said if you have discretion over the money, you cannot have variable compensation directly tied to those dollars. Or now in the logical extreme, you really could say, hey, you know what? We decided we're going to dial you 100% into our highest expense ratio ETF where we make the most money. Oh, it's a shame that it's 100% emerging markets and that we just took your risk through the stratosphere. But hey, we're going to make the most money. Like that's not even a problematic conflict of interest you have to disclose. That's an untenable conflict of interest that's just flat out prohibited. Not even specific to robo-advisors. No one will be able to have variable compensation over portfolios in which they have discretion. If you can change the allocations, you cannot benefit more from one versus the other using that discretion. It's just viewed as a prohibited, untenable conflict of interest. So Schwab now has a problem, because they fit the exact version of variable compensation with discretion that the DoL fiduciary rules ban. They're not only not level fee fiduciaries, they can't even qualify under a best interest contract. It just flat out won't work. And the problem isn't unique to Schwab. I think Future Advisor is now going to face this as well. So as many of you know, Future Advisor got bought by Blackrock. Blackrock bought them because essentially it's going to become a distribution channel for iShares ETFs, which Blackrock owns. So the Blackrock Future Advisor platform, I've been predicting for a long time, is going to look a lot like the Schwab platform. Schwab fills it with Schwab ETFs. BlackRock will fill Future Advisor with BlackRock ETFs. Not surprisingly, then Invesco bought GemStep, so Invesco makes PowerShares ETFs. So you can see this playing out. All the ETF providers are buying robo-advisors so that they can put their manufactured product into the robo as a distribution channel. But again, this doesn't work in a DoL fiduciary environment. Future Advisor is likely going to have the same problem. Now, Future Advisor is a little bit different. It's not a it's not a B2C entity. It's a B2B entity. They're going to work with advisors. But DoL Fiduciary says that you have this problem either if you serve retirement investors or the fiduciaries who serve them. So if the advisor is a fiduciary to the IRA under DOL rules, and then BlackRock's future advisor, Robo, works with the human advisor, that is a fiduciary connection as well, for which, once again, having variable compensation with discretion is prohibited. So BlackRock's future advisor is going to have the same problem as Schwab's is. And basically what we're seeing is DOL Fiduciary is screwing up this whole strategy of using a robo-advisor as a distribution channel when your distribution channel includes discretionary management. It's one thing when you just plug your products in. It's another when you plug your products in and you have discretion over the allocation amongst those products, which fundamentally is the asset allocation service that robo-advisors do. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean all robos are dead and it's the end of robo-advisors. As I've written separately, I think they're just dying off because of client acquisition costs. And this will create some wrinkles, but it's not like the unequivocal banning of all robo-advisors. As I said earlier, companies like Betterment and Wealthfront actually come out looking better in this DOL fiduciary environment because they do act as true intermediaries that operate for level fees. They do not have the conflict of being a product manufacturer, putting their own product into their own robo solution. Now, for companies like Schwab and BlackRock, there are some other options, and I think what you'll see is they're going to restructure the nature of the relationship. So they could just become non-discretionary and let consumers, build their own models, but that kind of defeats the robo purpose. So I doubt they're going to go non-discretionary. I think what you're going to see is that they're going to raise their fees, or at least they're going to raise their stated fee. What you're going to see is companies like Schwab and Future Advisor are going to mimic Wealthfront and Betterment in charging wrapper fees after all, because the wrapper fee becomes a way to create a level fee fiduciary environment. So on one version, they could charge a 25 basis point wrap fee and then waive all the expense ratios of their proprietary products and essentially say, all right, you're not going to pay any expense ratio on the Schwab ETFs or any of the other ETFs. We're just going to charge a flat 30 basis point fee for everything and waive the ETFs and make it up on the upfront fee. Now we have a level fee environment. Now, the problem is I'm actually not even sure that will work because level fee fiduciary looks not just at the platform, but the institution, related parties, everybody that touches this. And the irony is in a world where the robo-advisor waives the fees, or the robo-advisor makes the ETF waive its fees, the ETF company still makes more money by having low fee funds waived than high fee funds waived. So you actually still have this conflict. I suspect actually the easiest, and it's not that easy, but it's doable, the easiest way for them to fix this will be what I call a gross up fee. So they might say, look, your total fee, your all-in fee will always be 30 basis points. If you buy a Schwab ETF that costs you 25 basis points, we're going to add 5 bips to that allocation. If you buy an outside fund that charges, that where Schwab makes no money, we're going to add 30 bips to it. So we're going to gross up the cost so that no matter what your allocation is, Schwab slice is a flat 30 bips or 25 bips or wherever said they set the price point to be competitive. But they have this huge mess of a fee structure now because it's very difficult to operate as a level fee fiduciary with your own manufactured product where you make different margins and different profits off of different products that you put in there. You can do it if you just sell it directly and the advisor does it. The problem is they're managed accounts with discretion. And it's the discretion plus variable fees that create the problem. So either you have to give up the discretion or you have to give up the variable fees and figure out how to levelize it across the entire structure. Because again, these rules apply level fee fiduciary based on the advisor, the institution, related parties, affiliates, everything wrapped together has to meet the level fee fiduciary requirement. Now, it's worth noting with all of this that at the end of the day, this is still only for retirement accounts. DOL Fiduciary applies to retirement accounts and retirement investors. So the other weirdness from this, you can actually still have the conflicted version of the robo-advisor for brokerage accounts, taxable accounts, just not for IRAs. And we'll see. You may even find that suddenly a couple of robo-advisors start saying, we're only doing brokerage accounts and we're not going to do retirement accounts anymore. And, they'll may say something like, well, we do it in brokerage accounts because that's where you get the value of the tax loss harvesting and all the rest. But I think what you'll find is we only do robo-advice for a taxable account will become a warning sign, a code, a red flag for we're so conflicted, we can only do it in a brokerage account. We're not allowed to do it in a retirement account because of DoL Fiduciary. So watch this playing out in the coming year. The DoL Fiduciary rules have just thrown a wrench in the works for this whole framework of robo-advisors as a distribution channel, even as companies like Blackrock spent $150 million trying to buy a robo-advisor to make it a distribution channel. It won't kill all robo-advisors. In fact, again, the early players are the ones that actually come out the cleanest in this because they already were functioning as level fee fiduciaries, at least from what we can see externally. It's the companies that were using this as a distribution channel for their proprietary products where it gets messy. So these rules kick in a year, little less than a year, April 10th, 2017. Expect to see sometime over the next 11 months some announcements coming out of Schwab Intelligent Portfolios, their institutional portfolios, Future Advisor, and some of the others. Anyone that's got a robo-advisor attached to their own funds, as they try to figure out how to restructure the relationship to be legitimate in a DoL fiduciary future where they have discretion and variable compensation, because it just doesn't work under the existing rules the way that they've done it. Or maybe they'll eschew retirement accounts altogether and just go to brokerage accounts. But it's an interesting wrinkle that kind of came out of left field from DoL Fiduciary. I haven't seen any discussion of it so far in the industry media, but it is coming. It is a problem. And stay tuned to see how the companies handle it. And so I hope this is helpful as just some food for thought around DoL Fiduciary, where things are going in the future, how this how this impacts robo-advisors, and some of the changes that you're going to likely see. It doesn't necessarily kill robo-advisors at all, but it's going to change how they structure some fees in ways that I think ultimately is a positive. What you're going to see is more transparency out of this, because the pressure now is robo-advisors to make sure they get the same level fee regardless of where your allocations are in order to keep it clean and keep it transparent. So I ultimately view this as a plus, but for companies that view this as a distribution channel, it's a real wrench in the works. So thanks for joining us. This is Michael Kitces, office hours, 1 p.m. East Coast time every Tuesday. Hope this has been helpful for everyone, and thank you very much. Have a great day.